So in this video, we're going to be talking about fatty acid synthesis. So before we can get into the specific details of fatty acid synthesis, we need to overview the metabolic pathways that happen before it. So, like we said before, the cell takes in glucose. Glucose is going to enter the glycolysis pathway and produce pyruvate. Pyruvate is then going to enter the mitochondria and be converted into acetyl-CoA by the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. Now, acetyl-CoA is then going to merge with oxaloacetate to form citrate, and this marks the beginning of the TCA cycle. Citrate is then going to be converted into isocitrate by the enzyme aconitase. Isocitrate is then going to be converted into alpha-ketoglutarate by the enzyme isocitrate dehydrogenase. Alpha-ketoglutarate is then going to enter through a series of enzymatic reactions, and it's going to finish the TCA cycle by being converted into oxaloacetate. So this is kind of a quick revision of the TCA cycle. Now, something important to understand is that fatty acid synthesis takes place inside the cell when the cell is in a high energy state. That means that the cell is in a FET state and that there's a lot of ATP in the cell. So what happens is that all that extra ATP that we have, or all that energy that we could potentially have, has to be stored in a way. And the way that we store energy is going to be in the form of fatty acids. So it's only when there's high energy levels or high ATP levels that fatty acid synthesis will begin. So let's say the person is in a FET state and there's a lot of ATP in his cells. ATP is going to negatively inhibit the enzyme isocitrate dehydrogenase. And this, in turn, is going to lead to the accumulation of isocitrate, and that's going to lead to the accumulation of citrate. So, citrate is going to be shunted out of the mitochondria and into the cytosol by the citrate shuttle, and citrate is going to then be converted into fatty acids, or it's going to enter the process of fatty acid synthesis. So this is kind of the general overview of fatty acid synthesis. So now we're going to begin to discuss the specific steps that happen in fatty acid synthesis. So like we said before, citrate is going to accumulate inside of the mitochondria in high energy states. The first step is going to be the transportation of citrate out of the mitochondria into the cytosol where fatty acid synthesis takes place. And that's going to be done by something called the citrate shuttle. The next step is going to be the conversion of citrate into acetyl-CoA, and this is going to be done by the enzyme ATP citrate lyase. The third step is going to be the conversion of acetyl-CoA into malonyl-CoA, and this is going to be done by the enzyme acetyl-CoA carboxylase. So what's pretty much going to happen is that we're going to add a carbon onto acetyl-CoA to get malonyl-CoA. And of course, anytime there's a carboxylase reaction, biotin is going to be needed as a cofactor. So up to this point, it's pretty much straightforward. So the next step is going to be the synthesis of something called palmitate. And palmitate is going to be the fatty acid that we synthesize in our cells. So this is going to be the main fatty acid that is found in our body. So how does this happen? Well, after we get a few malonyl-CoAs inside of our cells, these malonyl-CoAs are going to enter a series of enzymatic reactions. NADPH is going to be consumed. Now remember that we said NADPH is going to be important for fatty acid synthesis. And at the end of it, it's going to form palmitate, which is the main fatty acid that is found in our bodies. Now, after palmitate is formed, it can either be used for by various tissues based on their needs to break it down and make ATP, or it could be stored in the form of triglycerides in adipose tissue, so depending on the body needs. And this is going to conclude basically fatty acid synthesis.